The turn of events on the Marikana koppie on the 16th of August in 2012, which left 34 striking miners dead. Let's now cross live to Pretoria.
Where they weren't attacking members of the SABC. Okay, so I've got 4 slides of this, but I'm just going to deal with it this way. A lot of people have started using the term crossfire to talk about the situation at scene 2, the shootings at scene 2. So now, as I've shown, and as is generally accepted, the police units approached scene 2 from different sides. One thing that I haven't, of course, emphasized is that there was no central command being exercised of these different police units. And though there were police helicopters positioned above the area, they didn't draw the attention of the police on the different sides of scene 2 to the fact that there were other police units positioned on the opposite side. So what you had, and it's not entirely clear when the first shots were fired, but nevertheless what you had is, for instance, after the police had opened fire on Mr. Mkonjwa, the first man to be fatally injured, you have gunfire being fired through the scene 2 area, and you have police on the other side of the scene 2 area coming to the conclusion that there's strikers in the koppie that are firing at them. Okay, so now, just when one uses the term crossfire, so you can imagine that people who are at the back of this room are a group of police, and the panelists here are a group of robbers or gang members who involved in an exchange of fire with people at the back of the room. And the people in the middle of the room here are caught in this exchange of fire. That would be caught in the crossfire. Okay, we are firing at them and they are firing at us, and you in the middle are caught in the crossfire. That is what is crossfire. But now, crossfire is not an appropriate kind of metaphor to use in relation to what had happened at scene 2. What happened at scene 2 was that the police, it is correct to say that the police, the gunfire that was coming towards members of the SABC, the overwhelming probabilities indicate that that is likely to have been exclusively or virtually exclusively from other members of the SABC. Okay, but what the SABC members did in response to this gunfire was that they fired into the scene 2 area. So they weren't firing back at the police on the far side of the koppie. In response to the fire that was coming in their direction, they were firing with the intention of shooting at the strikers. So you've got a large number of people gathered in this area, and basically you've got those police on the west side potentially not really being able to see who the people are that their bullets are affecting. They're shooting into the area. And then you've also got members of the NIU potentially shooting, some of them potentially shooting from positions adjacent to the high rocks, but others shooting, and that is obviously not a crossfire scenario, shooting from on top of the high rocks towards people in that group of people who huddled together amongst those rocks and bushes. Okay, so in a position where I need to wrap up, but basically then, the simple point is that from an approach of responsible or professional policing, what one is supposed to do in this kind of situation is that one is supposed to take cover and try and identify the source of the gunfire. And then, if one isn't going to be exposing innocent people to danger, one might take action against the shooters if one has identified people who are shooting at you. But this isn't what happened at scene 2. And so it seems clear that, that the police at scene 2 were acting in a way which was at the very least reckless and irresponsible, But it seems that it goes beyond that. And it seems that when, in understanding the events at scene 2, one needs to also see emotions as having a powerful role in directing, in motivating the type of response, the type of way in which the police, or we're talking about particularly those police officers who became most actively involved in the shooting. That emotion played some kind of role in shaping their response. And so, I've got a couple of slides here which talk about what those emotions, are likely to have been. They might have been partly emotions which are vindictive and kind of punitive ones. And so, yes, so I think I'm going to move past this point and just talk very briefly about this last issue here. So now, at the Marikana Commission, one of the witnesses who was called was one of the strikers a survivor of the shootings in the killing zone. He'd been one of the strikers who had been amongst the people who'd been gathered there. And a man by the name of Mr. Mshamba. And he gave evidence to the effect that some of the strikers there had been surrendering when they had been shot. Unfortunately, there were aspects of Mr. Mshamba's evidence which were open to question. And so the Commission was not in a position where it could confidently accept Mr. Mshamba's evidence. So anyway, what I did was I looked at, well, in the region of 200 strikers, statements from strikers, and I eventually came to the conclusion that about 153 of them appeared to be relevant to what had happened at scene 2. So now, these statements from strikers were taken in the 5 days after the 16th. What had happened was that strikers at scene 2 had been arrested. Well, let's first make note of the fact that some of them were seriously injured. And those people who survived were taken to hospital. Okay, so there were some people in hospital, some people who were not in a fit state to give statements to the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. Nevertheless, there are some statements from people who were hospitalized. But then there were people, I think it was supposed to have been in the region of 270 people who were taken to police stations. And they were distributed amongst 4 police stations. So in the situation in which they were, it would not have been possible for them to collude in producing a common narrative. Over the 5 days that followed, there was basically, of the statements that I analyzed, only one was taken on the Friday. But starting on the Saturday, the IPID was taken involved in the systematic process of collecting statements from strikers who were being held in police custody and at the hospitals. And so, from these independent locations in the period immediately after the shootings, there's independent accounts from. Well, I had 57 statements from strikers that indicated that they'd witnessed people being shot while surrendering. What I also then did in this process of analysing the statements was I discarded some of them because some of them had features which indicated that they might be unreliable in a similar way to the way in which Mr. Mshamba's evidence indicated, had features that indicated that it might be reliable. So I only retained the statements that didn't have features that indicated that they might be unreliable. I mean, retained the statements that appeared to be reliable, and from amongst those there were 46 statements that indicated that strikers had been shot while they were surrendering. They also indicated, and I'm going to wrap up now, Gareth, but they also indicated that strikers, and not just these 46 statements, there were about 90 or 100 of them that indicated that strikers were systematically assaulted by police at scene 2 in the aftermath of the shooting. They also indicated that there's about 4 or 5 of them that appear to be have been taken from strikers who were in the van with Mr. Sakalala while he was breathing his last breaths. They appealed to the police to provide him with medical assistance, and there was this dismissive response from the police. I mentioned that earlier. And then you also, just as a further confirmation of the veracity of these statements, because these statements, it shows that there wasn't an agenda behind these statements. These were objective accounts of what had happened at scene 2. 14 of the statements, including 7 of the statements that say that people were shot while surrendering, confirm something which is attested to by 2 of the commanders who were present at scene 2, which is that they were calling on the SABC members to cease fire, but that the shooting continued, notwithstanding their calls. Okay, so that's. I'm going to just. It's going to be very quick. Yeah. So then we've got Mr. Mbumza. We don't know what part of the events at scene 1 he had witnessed. But he might have witnessed his colleagues being gunned down there. He then might have been amongst the group who fled from scene 1 to scene 2. He was at scene 2. He would then have witnessed his colleagues being gunned down there. He would have also witnessed many of his colleagues being assaulted by members of the SABC. He then made a run for it, and in the final moments before he was killed, he raised his assegai against an SABC member. He was gunned down by the SABC. Whether it's correct to say that Mr. Mpumza was attacking the SABC or not seems to be a bit more complicated than that. The SABC itself has not given a full account of the killing of Mr. Mpumza. The Marikana Commission was not satisfied with the account that it provided of Mr. Mpumza's death. And so, yes, okay, so that's my presentation. I'm going to skip my conclusions.
Thank you very much. So that's, if you want more detail, and there's a lot more detail, the report is now available online, and it goes into more detail than that. So you can see it was a clear process, careful consideration of hundreds of statements, forensic reports, photographs, video footage, to reconstruct what happened there. And I think it's quite clear that any inaction now on the part of the IPID, the NPA, to use that evidence, which they have, this is not stuff that they don't have, it's just not tolerable. So without me saying any further ado, I'd like to please welcome Nomzamo to the podium and have a drink with him. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to thank ISS for inviting Sarah to come speak at this seminar. But most importantly, I'd like to thank ISS for having commissioned this report and David who haven't done it. And the real reason is that the one basic thing that all the families had in common when they met Sari was that they wanted an explanation of how, why, and by whom their loved ones were killed. From the very first time that we met them. And it was clear to us that there was a need for this. And there were many reasons. One of those was that when they went to the local drinking holes, when they went to fetch water by the river, everybody whispered behind their backs. Everybody said, that woman's son attacked the police in Marikana and that's why he's dead. When they watched the TV, Ria Piecha was there, saying this is the best of responsible police. So for them, they needed an account. And unfortunately for them, The president, when he started the commission, said the commission must establish the precise facts and circumstances under which any force was used. Not even just lethal force, but any force was used. But it got to a point in the commission that everything became about the apportionment of blame. Everybody was covering themselves, saying, I'm not responsible, I'm not responsible, and I'm not responsible. And it got to the point where we had our president at the commission giving evidence. And when he gave his evidence, he is quoted in the beginning of the SABC head of argument. And they quote him saying, this tragedy happened as a result of a collective failure by many role players and stakeholders. And he says, we must take collective responsibility as a nation. We must dip our heads and accept that we failed the people of Marikana, particularly the families and the workers and those who died. These are the words of President Ramaphosa. But then comes along the report of the commission. The report of the commission does a bit more apportionment of blame. In the report of the commission, a lot more blame is
okay, you've been watching a media briefing live from Pretoria, the ISS report on the Marikana killings, the Institute for Security Studies there.
Well, that's just giving us the latest in terms of how far we've come since that fateful day in 2012.
That footage is still very much haunting, isn't it? When you watch that, you hear this volley of gunfire, and it lasts for just about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And you hear officers screaming, ceasefire, ceasefire. So still very much haunting till this day. And we're going to be talking about this a lot today.